In 1816, the first working telegraph system was created. In 1876, clear human speech was electrically transmitted for the first time. In 1880, they thought up these guys. In 1939, the first commercially available TV sets were sold. In 1971, the first personal computer was publicly available. In 1981, the first portable personal computer was available. In 1983, the first cell phones were sold. In 1989, the World Wide Web was invented. In 1992, the first PDA and smartphone were introduced. In 1997, the first social media. And in 2007, Apple releases the iPhone. Since the invention of the telegraph, technological innovation has been accelerating faster and faster. I mean, as of 2022, Apple refreshes the iPhone lineup each year. The resolution of screens hasn't stopped getting higher, and consumerism is more prevalent than ever. The things we buy aren't exactly free, and the materials have to come from somewhere. You, the curious viewer, might ask, well, where is that somewhere? And guess what? It's right here. The materials that go into all the shiny new things we like have to come from the very same world that we live in. And this pattern can't continue forever. So for the sake of our planet and ourselves, we should carefully consider the impact of buying new things, especially electronics, and ask ourselves, do I really need that? Nothing I do requires a broken mini DV deck, 3 laptops, all of these point and shoots, a cassette transcribing machine, or a security camera. I only really have them because I wanted them or thought it'd be cool to have. The relevant thing here is that I didn't buy any of this new, which leads me into my first point. We, as a society, tend to spend a lot of money on a lot of stuff we don't need, or stuff that does more than we need. If you spend some time on social media or go to any coffee shop, it's almost inevitable that you'll see a new high-end MacBook being used for pretty basic stuff like email, web browsing, streaming videos, and light creative tasks like writing or photo editing. All of this could be done nearly just as well on much older and more affordable hardware. A 2022 14-inch MacBook Pro starts at $2,000 and is far more powerful than is necessary for writing, web browsing, and media consumption. A 10-year-old computer can work nearly just as well. As of me making this video in 2022, a 2012 MacBook Pro in good condition with good hardware and an upgraded SSD instead of the old slow stock hard drive costs around $150 to $200 on eBay. A Windows laptop with similar specs from the same era costs about the same, sometimes less due to not being an Apple product. My daily driver laptop is a 10-year-old ThinkPad, right over there. I bought this little guy for school earlier this year for $120, and wouldn't you believe it, but it works great. I can write, take notes, check my email, watch YouTube, all the basic stuff. It can handle my Notes app, a text editor, a few web pages, and Spotify just fine. I even occasionally edit 1080p footage on it. Not great, but entirely capable. It even works for games, too. Mostly older or less demanding ones. I've played a few acceptable League of Legends games on it. I would show it to you, but it's part of my teleprompter setup. Even older is this 2007 MacBook Pro, which is kind of a real dinosaur. I really only use it for its FireWire ports or the occasional in-bed YouTube watching. The screen and speakers actually hold up really well. You could pick one of these up for about $50 on eBay, so if you're not planning on doing anything remotely demanding and don't mind waiting on your web browser, it's pretty capable. Anyways, if you don't do or don't expect to do work that requires much computing power or need a laptop to accompany a desktop, a 10-year-old computer might be a great option, and you can save a bunch of money. In the example before, that'd be like $1,800. Now, all that talk of laptops has me kind of hungry, so come on and follow me to the kitchen real quick. Let's talk about unitaskers. Unitaskers are kitchen tools with a single, very specific use that usually can be accomplished with other implements and are another example of buying more than we need. One of the most common unitaskers I see is the avocado slicer, which, as the name suggests, is designed to make cutting, pitting, and slicing an avocado easier. The problem with the avocado slicer, though, and unitaskers in general, isn't about what it does, it's about what it doesn't do. Unlike a knife, the avocado slicer can't do any of the other jobs which a knife can, while costing more and taking up more space. Of course, there are some scenarios where something like the avocado slicer isn't a waste of money and space. For example, someone who really struggles with using knives and or eats a lot of avocados. Or a knife-concerned parent of a kid who eats a lot of avocados. For most people, though, the avocado slicer, or any unitasker, will ultimately serve as kitchen clutter. One of these products doesn't make much difference, but when many single-purpose items are bought and stored, the monetary cost and amount of space they take up will accumulate. Like, imagine you buy every as-seen-on-TV kitchen gadget that you can get a call now to for one deal on. Unless you have a huge kitchen, you'll fill up so much space storing all of it that when it comes time to use any of them, you'll have to paw through cabinets and cupboards full of things which market themselves as being way more convenient than whatever method you were using to do the same stuff before. Except before, you didn't have to paw through all those avocado slicers and bacon waves, which doesn't seem very convenient to me. Speaking of convenience and avocados, fast fashion. According to a 2021 article from Rachel Monroe, the average American buys one new garment each week, and for every 5 new garments bought, 3 are thrown away. And a lot of cheap clothes are so poorly made that they're not desirable after their initial few wears, making them hard to donate or give away. Quoting that article from Monroe, the volume of clothes Americans throw away has doubled over the past 20 years. We each generate about 75 pounds of textile waste a year, an increase of more than 750% since 1960. That's more than half the weight of an average human in textile waste, or a whole child, or a large dog, or, combined, 25 billion pounds per year. So, where does all that waste go, anyways? Our current way of living has some pretty serious side effects, both environmental and humanitarian. After some item is neither wanted nor useful, it usually gets shipped overseas or ends up in a landfill. But what about recycling? I try to recycle everything I can, you say, and fortunately, the truth is, sometimes recycling isn't much better either. Remember when I said waste gets shipped overseas? Yeah, so does recycling. Some recyclers don't recycle at all, instead shipping the waste to developing nations to be dealt with there. And saying that it's dealt with there implies that it actually eventually gets recycled or something. But to deal with it can mean dump it in a big pile until it's a problem, and a problem it is. In 2020, near Ghana's capital city, a mountain of discarded clothes generated enough methane gas to explode, and it continued to burn for months. Not only is it a big, dangerous fire, but since the clothes are made so cheaply with poor quality synthetic materials, all those chemicals get released into the atmosphere, polluting the air, soil, and water which sustains life. Overseas e-waste recycling is even worse, as it's commonly recycled informally, without regulations, or in residential homes and public areas by workers who lack personal protective equipment. And electronics are a lot more complicated than clothes. A shirt is some pieces of fabric stitched together. A phone is a little box containing thousands of teeny tiny components, each one made up of rare materials, all combined with precision approaching atomic levels. The recycling processes to get all those little bits out requires all kinds of heat, chemicals, solvents, and complex processes. And when these processes are poorly regulated or entirely unregulated, the dangerous byproducts of recycling and parts of the waste itself get released into the surrounding environment, posing serious danger to those doing the recycling and those who live nearby. Well, maybe you make an effort to reduce your waste, selling and donating all that you no longer want. And that's great, really. But unfortunately, that's not all of it. The very act of buying new has implications too. Nearly all of the products we buy have a lot of steps of logistics involved in their production and distribution. For example, materials may be gathered from several different countries, then shipped to a raw material distributor, then to a refinery, then a component manufacturer, then a factory. And depending on the complexity of the product, how many components and materials it has, there could be a lot more of these paths. And at this point, this hypothetical product only exists and is yet to be bought. If ordered directly, the product gets delivered straight to the buyer. Usually, though, the product gets first distributed to a reseller such as Amazon, or in some cases, a regional office or distribution center, then to the customer via a postal service or delivery service. If bought in store, the product has to go through some steps to first get distributed to that store, then the customer must drive to the store and pick it up. Each of these locations may be in vastly separate areas or vastly separate countries even. 90% of cargo travels by ship, and the maritime shipping industry, with over 100,000 large ships, is responsible for 3% of global greenhouse gas emissions, which, if it were a country, would rank 6th in the world. Okay, I can't keep going without acknowledging some other opinions. Some might argue that this kind of consumerism is good, as it moves money around and stimulates the economy. There's some value in this, but I want to ask you something. Is stimulating the economy worth the sacrifice of our people and our planet? I mean, if we as a society manage to safely recycle nearly all of our waste with high efficiency and move to exclusively carbon neutral transport and factories, consumerism would be more of an issue of space, material usage, and individual satisfaction. Oh, and of course, making the rich even richer, but I could say a lot about that, and the video is as long as I want it already. This isn't the case, though, and we can see this if we take a look here at this article from the ICCT.org. In 2015, there were 60,000 premature deaths caused by air pollution from the shipping industry alone. And if 60,000 deaths isn't motivating, and you prefer a dollar amount, that's 160 billion in health damages. But wait, there's a solution here. Buy used. When you buy used stuff, there are significantly less emissions. The most emissions are generated at the start and end of a product's life cycle, when it's being made and distributed, and when it's being recycled or disposed of. So if you buy something used, it's already been made and distributed, and the only emissions are those which get the product from the seller to you. If you buy local on Craigslist or thrift stores, those emissions are whatever emissions your mode of transport makes. Buying online is worse emissions-wise, as it still has to get shipped, but it's only between 2 or 3 points. The same sort of logic applies to the disposal process too. The more owners some item had before getting thrown away, the less waste each of its owners is responsible for. Compare these two scenarios here. Scenario 1. A single laptop over the course of 10 years changes hands between 10 owners, then gets discarded. Scenario 2. Over the course of 10 years, 10 people buy a different laptop, use it for a year, then upgrade and throw it away or store it indefinitely. People don't tend to really do this exact thing with laptops, but it works as an example, okay? Anyways, in scenario 1, each owner is responsible for 1/10 of a laptop's eventual total waste, versus scenario 2, where each owner is responsible for one whole laptop's eventual total waste. Not only does buying used reduce emissions, but it also gets you higher quality stuff for cheaper. Here in Portland, it's pretty cold and wet out there right now, and it'd be awfully nice to have a good jacket. I could go over to Target and buy a decent coat for $50. I could go over to REI and buy a really nice coat for a few $100, or I could go over to a local thrift store, even cheaper, the Goodwill bins, and find a nice coat for anywhere from $5 to $20. And just to prove that, let me show you. This is one of my favorite coats. It's this nice vintage Helly Hansen, like rubber coat. I think I got it for $10. Or this heavy duty, like work coat, I think was maybe $2. As long as you don't mind not being the first owner of something, you can save huge. A lot of stuff depreciates pretty fast. Computers, cars, clothes, furniture. So if you look for something only a couple years old, you can get something almost as good as new for less. Or in some cases, you can get old professional gear that's as good as new consumer gear for the same price or, again, less. There's something that I've learned in the past few years, and to be honest, I'm still learning. And it's that, well, even when it's used and carbon neutral and not taking up much space and so on and so forth, new stuff doesn't really help me. I'm a musician, multi-instrumentalist, songwriter, that kind of stuff, and have been since I was pretty young. I was making multi-track recordings in GarageBand on my father's computer when I was 8 or so, and since I was a teenager who understood what gear does and how it can be used, I would lust after all sorts of pieces of equipment, thinking that they would help me finally do what I wanted, musically speaking anyways. And in a lot of cases, I would save up and buy that thing or get it for Christmas or my birthday, and believe it or not, they never really helped me accomplish any of those goals. I would sit down and play with them, but never ended up recording any of the albums or songs that I really wanted to. My space got cluttered with gear, and I never spent the time to master any of it, and with each new item, I would grow dissatisfied quicker and quicker. I finally realized this when I was maybe 17 or 18, and have largely stopped lusting after gear as I once did. There's stuff that I want and occasionally buy, of course, but I know it won't help me be a better musician. This summer, I recorded my first proper album. Shameless self-promo, I know, but I didn't record it with my nice multi-tracker or mix it on my desktop. I recorded it with this cassette recorder and mastered it in Audacity, which is a free audio program. And sure, to some degree, this is some pretentious hipster stuff. I mean, clearly. Same with a little short film thing that I released earlier this year. I filmed it on one of my cheap little point and shoots. And there's something I see a lot on the internet, especially with tech people. There's this idea that you have to have the highest resolution camera and the best gear to make something good. And that's one of the big arguments towards buying new stuff, but the reality of it is that having good equipment means nothing if you're not willing to master it. One of my inspirations, bassist and electronic musician Tom Jenkinson, better known as Square Pusher, sequenced all of his incredibly complex music from the 90s up until 2001 on a Roland DR660, an extremely fiddly little non-event of a drum machine in a lineup of machines meant for guitarists to jam along to until they find a real drummer to play with. And well, why did he stop using it? Simply put, because it broke. From everything I've read, the machine he bought as a replacement is still in use today. It uses floppy disks. Upgrading isn't necessarily bad, though. Being unrealistic about what will actually help you is bad. For professionals that have mastered their tools and at that point are held back solely by them, upgrading will likely give them better results, as most things have a ceiling for the quality of their output. I think this segment turned out to be a bit more rambly than I would have liked, but in short, if you learn to appreciate and respect your tools and learn their quirks, features, and flaws, they will reward you for that. And in the spirit of this, I'll film the conclusion on this. Next time you see something you want, I ask you to, before purchasing, consider a few things. First, is it something that will benefit you, you have space and money for, and will genuinely improve your quality of life? Second, can you get it used to save some cash and cut down on emissions and waste? Third, if you can't get it used, can you get an eco-friendly alternative if it itself isn't? And fourth, if you can't, is it worth the negative environmental and human impact? But, it isn't your fault, or any other single consumer's fault. It's the fault of the cultures and corporations which promote this type of consumerism. Don't blame it on the little guys. They're a microscopic part of a massive problem. And as always, thank you for watching. well, that's, now that we're off script and I just dropped my point and shoot all over the floor, thank you for watching. I've been Max Van Laningham. This is my first actual proper video essay, and I'm doing it for school. So shout out to Portland Community College. I don't know, hit the bell, hit the subscribe button, do whatever that kind of stuff you want to do.